If you recently picked up SpellForce Platinum for the first time, you might have some questions. For example, what character should I play? Should I be a warrior or a mage, and how can I avoid paying alimony for a child that's not really mine? Now, this video can't answer all of those, but it should hopefully help you with at least two. Before we begin, I want to preface this by saying that most types of characters can work in this game, and that you should play whatever you find interesting. That said, some characters are objectively better than others, and there's definitely a way of doing things wrong, so you should still continue watching. This video has two distinct parts, one referring to SpellForce The Order of Dawn and Breath of Winter, and one to Shadow of the Phoenix, since the latter allows you to take your builds much further towards the endgame. I first want to talk about how character builds work in general, with some recommendations towards the end. In terms of what kind of builds there are, I'd say three. Those would be optimal builds that make very good use of your attribute points, suboptimal ones that don't do it quite as well but still work, and plain bad ones that more or less softlock your build's progress. Mind you, there's no way to reset your skills once you commit to them, so choose carefully. Attribute points are important because besides increasing your attributes, they are needed to reach a higher level of a particular skill. For example, if you want to play as a heavy warrior, you'll need a lot of strength and stamina to increase it. For a type of mage, you might need intelligence and wisdom, and so on. To take this back to our build types, optimal builds would be the ones that ideally allow you to always upgrade your skills as soon as possible, either by only having to focus on one particular skill, or by using two skills that share a common attribute, such as the case with white and black magic that share the intelligence trait. Suboptimal ones, on the other hand, while still good, might have phases in the game where you'll be lacking the attributes to upgrade a skill right away, but as long as you can do it eventually, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And now, you can maybe already guess what a bad build would look like. If you decide to branch out into too many different skills, generally speaking 3 or more, you'll simply not have the attributes needed to level them, which will leave you with very poor equipment at later stages of the game, which in turn won't really be a fun experience for you. Besides attributes, you should also consider how different skills synergize with each other. If you're a warrior, it might not be bad to include some type of magic that helps you in close combat, be it offensive or defensive. If you're an archer, being able to summon a minion or two might come in handy at times. So, with the basics of how attributes work, what builds are actually good, especially as a beginner? If you really don't want to bother with anything we've talked about so far, at least in the first game, there's actually 3 pre-made builds that you can choose from that automatically distribute points when you level up. You have the choice between a black mage with a hint of fighter in him, an archer with white magic, or a heavy warrior who shoots out fire. All 3 of these are perfectly fine builds, and there's nothing wrong with using them. If you do want a more hands-on approach, here's what I recommend for The Order of Dawn and Breath of Winter. One of the easiest and strongest builds is something like a typical paladin. You start with heavy combat arts, either blade or blunt weapons, and heavy armor. Don't waste points on shields since most of your weapons will be two-handed anyway. Then you add white magic to it, either life or boons depending on if you want to heal or buff your character, but not both at once since you'll be lacking points. If you want, you can also add no more than 2 points into light combat arts without a particular designation to get the spells Berserk and Boons, which are very OP with this character, and you're pretty much good to go with your one-man army. You really need to try to die with this character, all while dealing insane damage, and it's also one that you can use all the way up to the end of Shadow of the Phoenix. The only thing I'd keep in mind is to prioritize heavy combat arts first and put points into white magic second. But if a mage is more your type, you can combine black and elemental magic, 2 skill trees that use the same attributes, meaning that you really can't mess this one up. I mean, you still could, but just make sure that the total number of skills you need to level doesn't exceed 5, or you'll be lacking skill points. For example, say you take ice and fire magic. Together with the elemental trait, that's 3. You then add black magic with death, that makes it 5. And then you just upgrade them depending on what you want to prioritize while dumping all your attribute points in intelligence and wisdom. This build is also great as a summoner one if you take necromancy instead of death. But then, say maybe you want to play more of a supportive character, in which case you could combine white magic with crossbows. This way your character can stay out of harm's way by attacking from behind while healing and or buffing other units. For it, focus on white magic, specifically healing and boons, and only upgrade archery last. There's a lot of possibilities, really, and while some builds will be a lot easier to pilot than others, all of them kinda work, provided you keep in mind the whole attributes thing we discussed earlier. Now, Shadow of the Phoenix is a little bit different since you import builds instead of creating new ones, meaning that you can, in theory, just use the same build you did in the first game and take it all the way to level 50. However, Shadow of the Phoenix also comes with a wide range of pre-made builds that are all very solid, so if you think you messed up your build in the first game, or you just want to try something new, take any of them and you won't do anything wrong. One thing to note here is that these builds don't level up on their own like they do in the Order of Dawn, so you'll have to upgrade them, but since they already have defined skill paths, that shouldn't be too difficult. That said, if you're looking for some insanely strong late game builds, you could take the Paladin from earlier, especially with boons, which, without spoiling, becomes really strong here, or something like Elemental Magic with high level wave and elemental rain spells, which also allows you to pretty much delete armies on your own late game. If you ask around, I'm sure others have many of their own builds and combinations that they can recommend, because there are simply a lot of those that are strong and viable, and that's the nice thing about it. You can always replay the game and try out new builds to see how they work or whether or not you like them, and the information from this video has hopefully made that a little bit easier. I know some people might be interested in so-called canon builds, so I'll mention them real quickly. For the protagonist of the Order of Dawn, you would go with light combat arts, blade weapons, and then light or heavy armor while dual-wielding some sort of weapon. The protagonist of Breath of Winter should spec fully into heavy combat arts with heavy blade weapons and heavy armor. Not the most exciting builds, I know, but fun to try if you're going for that lore-accurate playthrough. And now I want to hear from the people who've played before. What are your favorite builds and recommendations? Write them down in the comments so that new people can see them and see all the choices they have. And don't forget to like the video while you're at it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!